Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stamping with Melva. I'm Melva Peters, and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in British Columbia, Canada. And tonight, it's Thursday night. I almost said it was Tuesday night, but it's Thursday night, thank goodness. And it's time for a technique. So tonight, I'm going to show you how you can create some really pretty backgrounds using your blending brushes. I've been doing this a lot lately, it seems, to create backgrounds, and I was on a training event last weekend. Gosh, it's over a week ago now. Um, and I learned some more tips and tricks about how to create some pretty backgrounds using blending brushes and some tips for doing it. So I thought that I would jump on and show you that. I'm just looking down to see that I can see I'm live. I am. Oh, great. And I can see Nancy and Lynette. Don't forget to give StreamYard permission if you're coming in through Facebook. So you go to streamyard.com/Facebook, give permission, and that way I can see who's commenting right from the application that I use. Okay, let me switch over to my desktop and we'll get started. So I'm going to use the Daisy Garden. I love this. This is a background stamp. It's a very large stamp, single stamp, and I really love it to create some really pretty easy cards because it's a single stamp. But I'm going to make it a little bit more, more of a casual to avid card, only because of the background that I'm going to create. So I've already gone ahead and I'm using my Stamparatus. So one thing I will say, I've got a light here. One thing I will say is when I'm using these really large background stamps, there is a block that will fit this. I think it's a size F block that will fit it. I find it hard to hang on to the block because it is the size over the size of the stamp. So I find it hard to actually get a good image. So I love my Stamparatus for using these big background stamps. A couple of tips with this. I've already gone ahead and positioned it, but what I've done is, because this is a rubber stamp, you don't have to use the foam pad. If this was a photopolymer stamp, there is a rubber, a foam pad with the grid lines on it that fits in, and you need to use it if you're using photopolymer stamps. But because this is rubber, there's lots of cushioning. You don't have to. I do have one of the small grid paper pieces on here, and I haven't got my paper lined up against the edge. I have lined it up against the grid lines, and so you can use your grid paper to line up your paper so that you don't have to push it into the corner. I find that when I push it into the corner, I sometimes have a hard time getting the full image. Hello, Sandy. And so if I put it in the middle, and if you're going to repeat this and do it on multiple stamps, this grid line gives you, where you need to align it. So I've already got my piece of paper on here, and then I'm using my magnets to hold it in place. Now, when I create a background, I typically cut my piece of paper bigger than I want it to be. So in this case, I've got a piece of cardstock that is cut 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So that's 1/4 of a sheet, and then I will trim it down before I put it onto my card base. So it just allows me to position my stamp. When I'm creating the backgrounds with the blending brushes, sometimes the edges aren't as clean as what they'd like you to be, and what you'd like them to be. And so by making this bigger than you want, you can trim it down. So I've positioned my stamp. First of all, I laid my paper down where I wanted it, and then I put my stamp over top and then press down. So I've got my stamp in place. Now, I'm going to do a background, but I'm going to do some stamping first, and I'm going to use some embossed resist. So I'm going to be using my Versamark stamp pad, and then I'm going to stamp my paper using Versamark, and you're not going to be able to see this on camera, and I'm going to sprinkle it with white embossing powder. So I just want to make sure I've got my stamp completely inked up with the Versamark, and then I'm going to push it down. Now, you really want to make sure you use the palm of your hand to get it, that you position, or you're pressing down all over it so that you get a good coverage and it good inked up well. Now you're not going to be able to see that, but I'm just going to, okay, so that looks pretty good to me. Oops, get these magnets out. Make sure your magnets don't touch each other, because the last thing you want to do is have your magnets touch. They will shatter. Oopsie, I've got blurry here. I'm not sure why I've got blurry. There we go. Is that better? Let it refocus itself. Oh, it's not. There we go. Okay, now I've got my embossing powder in a plastic container, just because I find it easier to manage that way. So I am just dipping this in to cover it. You could use a plastic spoon, and if I ever find, I don't know that I've got plastic spoons, but a plastic spoon works really well, so you can kind of scoop your embossing powder up. Just got one. So I'm going to have to find some plastic spoons to put in, but in any event, so you probably can't see that, but it is covered with embossing powder. And for me, I don't have embossing powder all over the place, like I would do if I had it in the little jars. Okay, now this may get a little loud. Apologies for that, but I'm going to bring in my heat tool. I'm holding this down with my take your pick tool so it doesn't kind of go flying away, and I will try and talk over this. So when you're embossing, you want to put it on the second setting, so the highest setting, and you want to hold it over the image until you see that powder go from being dull, matte finish to shiny, a shiny texture, or yeah, shiny image. And so I can see it actually starting to go now. Once it's started to melt, you can slowly move your heat tool over the entire piece. It just takes a minute for it to start to melt. But once it does start to melt, it goes pretty quick. You could do this, because I'm going to do a background on this. You could do your stamping first, or your blending first, or you could do your image first. I'm going to do the image first, and then we'll do the background behind it. But either way works. Just getting there. Trying not to burn myself. All right. There we go. Getting there. You just want to make sure you've got the entire image embossed, and so that it is all shiny and not matte. Just got some here at the bottom to do. It always seems to take longer when you're like a watch pot never boils. Now, let's just make sure that I've got it. You can just have a quick look at it and see that it's all of your powder has melted. I think I've got it all. Okay, there we go. Now, again, I'm not sure you can actually see my image. Maybe not. Okay, all right, so I've got my blending brushes. I've got two different ones, and again, I should wash these one of these days, but I've got one that I've used purple on and one that I've used kind of pinky colors. I'm going to do Oh, you can see it. Okay, good. I'm going to do 3 colors on here. So I'm going to do Blushing Bride, Fresh Freesia, and Gorgeous Grape. So I am missing one thing that I need. Here we go. Maybe a little piece of Post-it note. I'm going to start with my lightest color. So that's the Blushing Bride. So when I use my blending brushes, I don't close it. So normally when you're stamping, you would actually close this. I am going to pick up some ink here. And then I'm going to pat it down on the lid. And the reason I do that, it just kind of takes off some of the color. Now, I'm also going to use this Post-it note, and I'm just going to lay this down on here. One, it holds it in place, and two, it stops my fingers from getting on and getting any oils and things onto my paper. Now, I'm going to start off my paper. So I try and start kind of off of my cardstock. And that way you don't get kind of a blob of color on your cardstock. And I'm using a circular motion. I don't know if you have to do that, but I tend to like to do that. And you can keep going. Isn't it? It's really pretty. I don't know if you can kind of see that, but it is just, it's really pretty. Okay. And if I decide to add more, I can do that. Now, I'm going to move on to the Fresh Freesia. Again, I'm not going to close my lid, and I'm going to pick up some Fresh Freesia. I'm going to move this down a little bit, and then pat it on here, and then start off the edge and start in my circular motion. So this creates kind of, I won't say an ombre effect because I am using 3 different colors, but if I'd used all purples, you would get more of an ombre effect of it. It's a kind of a rainbow effect with the and keep going until I get the color. And I'm blending right up into the pink that I started with. I don't know if you can see how pretty that looks. Okay, so I'm going to turn this so that now I've got my bottom exposed. And now my last color that I'm using is Gorgeous Grape. So again, start off the paper and just start blending. Tapping to get rid of the real excess of it. So there's all sorts of stamps you could do this. It doesn't have to be a background stamp. I was just sitting here thinking that the garden, I think it's called garden birdhouses, would be really pretty to do some birdhouses, and in white embossing powder, and then use a background over top of it. I'm just going to bring in my Fresh Freesia a little bit more. Now I'm going to just kind of run this off a little bit. I just want to get, I've got darker on one side here, and I just want to kind of match it up a little bit. It's also part of the reason that I like to cut my paper bigger than I need is, you may not see it, but I've got quite a dark spot down here, And I've got some, you know, where it's a little darker on the edge because that's where I've gone over it. Now, one thing that you can do, and I don't think I've got a piece here, is um, take not a baby wipe, paper towel and just wipe over this. If you've got any excess ink that will just sit on top of the the embossing, you want to remove that. So now I've got a really pretty background with the Blushing Bride, Fresh Freesia, and Gorgeous Grape. So I'm going to take and trim this. So what I'm using, so here's my background. So I've got Highland Heather, I've got Fresh Freesia as a layer. That's for the inside. And so my Fresh Freesia layer is 4 inches by 5 1/4. So I want to trim my flowers, this piece, to be 3 3/4 by 5. So I'm just going to take and 3 3/4. Okay, so let's trim this to 4. So I'm just going to trim a 1/4 inch off all the sides to get it to the size I want it to be. And I'm not really too worried if I'm actually cutting a little bit of the top of the flowers or some of the stamped image off. It's going to look pretty. You could take this and use it now to cut circles out of, or using a stitch rectangle, or one of the scallop contour dies. Any of those would work to be able to cut out a piece. So my background is 4 1/4 by 11, and I'm just going to score this at 5 1/2. So that's the side I scored on. Fold into the mountain or the raised side. That, grab your bone folder, give it a really good burnish. Okay, so I've got my background now. I've got my Fresh Freesia and my stamped layer, so I can tear this down. Yeah, this is really pretty. Turned out really well. And I don't know that, I think it's not even quite as pretty on this camera as what I see. I will post this card in a little bit on my blog. So, okay, so there's that. Now I'm going to put some ribbon on. I grabbed, this is the Fresh Freesia open weave ribbon. So I've got that option, or I've got the Gorgeous Grape. I'm thinking the Gorgeous Grape maybe for a bow at the bottom. And I realized I didn't grab a sentiment. Well, that wasn't clever. Let's find a sentiment too. Here. Got the special moments. So we'll use that one. Okay, so let's, I'm going to use the Gorgeous Grape ribbon. Just think it needs a bit of a pop, as if there isn't enough color on it already. So I'm just going to cut a piece that will fit around. I'm going to then take my Stampin' Seal and just put a little strip of Stampin' Seal and then wrap my ribbon around the bottom and around the back. If you find your ribbon doesn't stick well enough like this, you can take a piece of tear and tape adhesive and put over top of the ribbon, and that will definitely hold it in place. When I'm using ribbon, I like to use Stampin' Seal. I just think it holds it. I don't know if that's actually true, but I feel like it holds just a little bit better when I've got ribbon on. So, okay, and then I'll do my bow in a minute. I want to stamp a sentiment. So we are going to make this it's a really tiny little thank you. Let's see. How about this one that says, "Thanks for brightening up my day." Now, this is the special moments stamp set. You can get this free with a $120 order during celebration. That's $120 in Canada. Now, these are images are 95% of what they actually are. So the images on the front of the base are, or sorry, on the front of the box are different than what are a little bit smaller than what they are. I know what I keep going into that drawer for. I keep opening this drawer and I keep forgetting what it is I'm looking for. I'm looking for some basic white cardstock so that I can cut this sentiment out. All right, we're going to stamp this in Gorgeous Grape. And for those of you that follow me, you know that I like to fussy cut. I'm a big fussy cutter of my sentiments. I don't know, it's just a habit I've gotten into. So I'm just going to take and quickly fussy cut around this sentiment. Again, steering the paper with my left hand, the hand that doesn't have the scissors in it. So whichever hand you so I'm right-handed, so my left hand, but whichever hand is not holding the scissors is the hand that you want to be steering the paper with. You will find fussy cutting much easier if you do it that way. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to use some dimensionals. Yeah, this special moments stamp set is really nice. There are 21 different sentiments in it, so it's perfect. All sorts of every possible occasion that you will ever want a sentiment for. I'm just going to put that there. And now I think I'm just going to tie a faux bow. So when I say faux bow, all I do is I take a strip of it's probably about 4 inches of ribbon, tuck it underneath my ribbon, and just tie a single knot. And that's a faux bow. If you don't like tying bows or you struggle with bows, this is a perfect solution. Just tie a faux bow, and then you can trim these to whatever length you want them to be. There we go. Now, card wouldn't be finished if you didn't put some embellishments on it. So let me just close up my glue. Now I've got, these are the Pastel Pearls, and there's pink, maybe Highland Heather, kind of a smoky slate, and then Gorgeous Grape. So I'm going to use 3 of these. So we'll do a Gorgeous Grape for sure. And we will do one of these just because we can. And then this, let's put up here. There. Now I've got the inside of my card, and probably should have put a sentiment. What is there in this? Yeah, maybe not. Can't decide. So we're just going to adhere this. I will leave lots of room. So this is the inside is cut 4 inches by 5 1/4. And I will decide what sentiment I want on it when I go to give it away. But at least there's the inside of my card is finished. And I don't have to worry about that. There we go. All right. So few techniques tonight. So some techniques on for embossing, some techniques for creating background stamps, and I think for me one of the most important techniques is using the lid of your ink pad to take off some of the excess ink before you start adhering. making your piece of cardstock bigger so you can trim off any of the edges that aren't, you know, perfect. And using a little piece of like a Post-it note or a piece of paper on yours so that you're not getting your fingerprints on your card base. Sometimes if you get your inky fingerprints when you do go to use your blending brushes, you will find that you get a darker spot. And I thought I would just quickly show you one card that I did last night. This is another background. I use Night of Navy, Bermuda Bay, Highland Heather, and Gorgeous Grape on this one to create this background. And just kind of felt, and this is one of the palm dyes. So it's kind of a mix of a whole bunch of different things. This is from the On the Horizon. These are the new rhinestones that go with the new suite that is coming out March 1st called On the Waves. I think it's called On the Waves, something like Waves. And it's all in blues. So I thought it went really well with this card. But another background that I created where I just used the background for the card. So just another idea for you. All right. Here we go. I hope you give this a try. Dig out your blending brushes if you haven't been playing with them, because they are amazing. I use them all the time for all sorts of coloring, whether it's a background like tonight or even sponging. I don't bring out my sponge or sponge daubers very much anymore. I actually tend to use my blending brushes because they just, I love them. They're just so nice to use. And I hope you'll give it a try. All right, I will be back on Saturday at, oh, it'll be a little later. I have my team meeting on Saturday. Normally I go live at 11 o'clock on Saturdays, but it will be probably 1 o'clock on Saturday after my team meeting. And then I will be live on Sunday at 12 noon. So I hope you join me as much as you can. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great evening. Happy stamping.